$100K, be my wife for 1 month. The billionaire's son stunned a struggling waitress. What if a single moment of desperation could change 2 lives forever? Rebecca Martinez wiped her tired hands on her apron, the lunch rush finally ending at Murphy's Diner on Chicago's South Side. At 36, she'd been serving coffee and dreams to strangers for 15 years, each day blending into the next like cream into bitter coffee. Her fingers traced the overdue electric bill in her pocket, $300 she didn't have, with her landlord's final notice weighing heavily in her purse. The late afternoon sun streamed through the diner's cracked windows, casting long shadows across worn vinyl booths where she'd heard 1,000 stories of heartbreak and hope. Little did Rebecca know that in just moments, a man in an expensive suit would walk through that door with an offer that would sound completely impossible. Sometimes life's most beautiful chapters begin with the most unexpected words. Where are you watching from today? Christopher Blake adjusted his platinum watch as his driver pulled away from the corporate towers of downtown Chicago. At 42, he'd inherited more money than most people could spend in 10 lifetimes, yet he felt emptier than the expensive penthouse he called home. His father's investment empire had given him everything except the one thing he desperately wanted: genuine human connection. For months, his father had pressured him about marriage, threatening to transfer company control to his cousin unless Christopher settled down within the year. The black sedan had broken down 3 blocks from Murphy's Diner, and his phone had died somewhere between the mechanic's estimate and his growing frustration. The modest restaurant looked nothing like the 5-star establishments he usually frequented, but hunger and desperation made the decision for him. Rebecca looked up from wiping tables as the stranger entered, his tailored suit standing out like a peacock among sparrows. She'd learned to read people quickly in this job: the impatient businessman, the lonely regular, the family stretching their budget for a special meal. But this man puzzled her. Despite his obvious wealth, something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. "Just coffee, please," Christopher said, sliding into a corner booth. Rebecca poured the steaming brew, noticing how his expensive shoes were scuffed and his usually perfect hair looked disheveled. She'd seen that expression before, the look of someone carrying weight they couldn't share. "Rough day?" she asked gently, refilling his cup without being asked. Her kindness surprised him. In his world, people served him because they had to, or because they wanted something. Rebecca's concern seemed genuine. "You could say that," he replied, studying her face. There was something authentic about her. No pretense, no calculation. Just honest warmth. As Rebecca returned to her duties, Christopher found himself watching her interact with other customers. She remembered the elderly man's usual order, asked about the young mother's teething baby, and somehow made everyone feel seen. When his phone finally charged enough to make calls, he hesitated. An unexpected idea was forming, one that might solve both their problems. But as Rebecca approached with his check, he noticed her hands trembling slightly. The stress lines around her eyes told a story of struggle he recognized, desperation wearing a brave face. "Excuse me," Christopher said as Rebecca placed his check on the scarred Formica table. "This might sound strange, but I'd like to offer you a job." Rebecca's laugh came out sharper than she intended. "Sir, I already have a job. 3 of them, actually." She gestured around the diner, exhaustion creeping into her voice. "This, plus weekend cleaning at the medical center, plus night shifts at the gas station." Christopher's expression softened. He'd never met anyone who worked 3 jobs just to survive. "What I'm proposing is different. I need someone to pretend to be my wife for 1 month. I'll pay you $100,000. The coffee pot slipped from Rebecca's grip, clattering onto the table without breaking. Around them, the dinner crowd continued their conversations, unaware that her world had just tilted off its axis. "That's not funny," she whispered. "I'm completely serious." Christopher pulled out a business card. "My father owns Blake Industries. He's threatening to remove me from the company unless I marry within the year. I need someone who won't fall in love with my money, someone genuine." Rebecca stared at the embossed card, her mind racing. $100,000 would pay off her mother's medical bills, cover her rent for years, maybe even let her go back to school like she'd always dreamed. But the price seemed impossible. "Why me?" she asked, sinking into the booth across from him. "You could hire anyone. Because in the 30 minutes I've been here, I've watched you treat every person with dignity. You don't know who I am, yet you've been kinder to me than most people in my actual life." Christopher's voice held a vulnerability that made her chest tighten. "I'm not asking for anything inappropriate. Separate rooms, no physical contact beyond what we'd need to convince my father. Just 1 month of pretending we're happy together." Rebecca thought of her mother's latest chemotherapy bill, of the eviction notice hidden in her bedroom drawer, of all the dreams she'd put aside to survive. "If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up." "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course." Christopher stood, leaving $100 bill on the table. "But Rebecca," he'd read her name tag earlier, "sometimes the craziest opportunities lead to the most beautiful outcomes." As he walked away, Rebecca held the business card with shaking hands, wondering if desperation was about to make her the luckiest or most foolish woman alive. 3 days later, Rebecca stood outside the gleaming Blake Industries building, her one good dress pressed and her hands steady despite the storm raging in her chest. She'd called Christopher the night before, her mother's latest medical emergency making the decision for her. The elevator ride to the 50th floor felt like ascending to another planet. Christopher met her in his office, looking more nervous than she'd expected. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I need that money," Rebecca replied honestly. "But I have conditions. No lying about who I am or where I come from. If anyone asks, I tell them the truth. I'm a waitress from the South Side." Christopher nodded. "My father's expecting us for dinner tonight. He's difficult. He'll try to intimidate you." "I've been intimidated by the best of them," Rebecca said with a small smile. "Rich people aren't any scarier than bill collectors." That evening, Rebecca found herself in a mansion that could house 50 families. William Blake Sr. was exactly as intimidating as his son had warned, cold eyes that seemed to catalog her worth like she was a stock portfolio. "So you're the young woman who's captured my son's heart," the elder Blake said over dinner, his tone suggesting he found that impossible. "Tell me about your family." "My mother's a retired nurse. She raised me alone after my father died when I was 12. Rebecca's voice didn't waver. "She taught me that dignity isn't about how much money you have, but how you treat other people." Christopher watched his father's expression tighten. He'd expected his father to dismiss Rebecca immediately, but something in her quiet strength seemed to catch the older man's attention. "And what do you do for work?" William continued. "I'm a waitress. I also clean offices and work at a gas station." Rebecca met his gaze directly. "I'm not ashamed of honest work." For the first time Christopher could remember, his father seemed genuinely surprised. Later, as they drove back to Rebecca's apartment, Christopher broke the silence. "You were incredible tonight." Most people either grovel or get defensive around him. "I've got nothing to prove to anyone," Rebecca said simply. "Your father's approval won't pay my mother's medical bills or make me a better person." Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Christopher realized that in trying to solve his problem, he might have found something much more valuable. Someone who could teach him what authentic strength actually looked like. 2 weeks into their arrangement, Christopher found himself looking forward to coming home each evening. Rebecca had transformed his sterile penthouse into something that felt alive. Books scattered on tables, the scent of actual cooking replacing takeout containers, and laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent for years. "You don't have to cook," he told her one evening, finding her making homemade soup in his rarely used kitchen. "I like to cook," Rebecca replied, tasting the broth. "Besides, you look like you haven't had a real meal in months." She was right. Somewhere between board meetings and family obligations, he'd forgotten what comfort felt like. Now he found himself calling Rebecca during the day just to hear her laugh, and staying up late talking about everything from her dreams of becoming a teacher to his childhood fears of never being enough. The crisis came during the 3rd week, when William Blake announced a surprise family gathering. I want to see how well you two work under pressure, he told Christopher privately. At the gathering, Christopher's ex-fiancée Natasha appeared unexpectedly, armed with inside knowledge and cruel intentions. Isn't it fascinating, she announced to the room, how Christopher found love so conveniently close to father's deadline? Almost like it was arranged. The room fell silent. Rebecca felt every eye on her, judging, calculating. This was the moment she dreaded, being exposed as a fraud in front of people who already looked down on her. But Christopher surprised everyone, especially himself. You're right, Natasha. It was arranged. He took Rebecca's hand, his voice clear and strong. I arranged to find someone genuine in a world full of people who only care about money. I arranged to discover what it feels like when someone cares about who you are, not what you're worth. William Blake studied his son's face, seeing something there he'd never witnessed before, authentic happiness. Rebecca has taught me more about integrity in 3 weeks than I learned in 42 years, Christopher continued. She works 3 jobs to take care of her mother, yet she still finds time to make strangers feel valued. If that's not the kind of person I want beside me, then maybe I don't deserve the family business anyway. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Rebecca squeezed Christopher's hand, realizing that somewhere between the pretending and the soup-making, something real had grown between them. The question was whether it could survive the truth about how it all began. The silence in William Blake's study stretched between father and son like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Rebecca had excused herself to give them privacy, but her words from dinner echoed in both men's minds. Love isn't something you can arrange or deadline. It grows where it's nurtured. She's not what I expected, William finally admitted, his stern expression softening slightly. I wanted someone who could handle our world, but she's handled something much more difficult. She's handled you. Christopher looked up, surprised by the gentle humor in his father's voice. I've watched you for 3 weeks, son. You smile now. You call home. You've started asking about employees' families instead of just profit margins. William walked to the window, overlooking the city. I threatened you with marriage because I thought you needed a wife. But what you needed was to remember how to be human again. That evening, Christopher found Rebecca on the penthouse balcony, still wearing the simple black dress that had somehow outshone every designer gown at dinner. We need to talk, he said, his heart hammering against his ribs. I know. Rebecca turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. The month's almost over. I should probably start looking for a place. I love you. The words tumbled out before Christopher could stop them. I know that wasn't part of our deal, and I know it complicates everything, but somewhere between your terrible coffee and your incredible laugh, I fell completely in love with you. Rebecca's breath caught. Christopher, you don't understand. I'm not sophisticated like the women in your world. I don't know which fork to use or how to make small talk about stocks and bonds. Rebecca. He stepped closer, his voice gentle but certain. I don't want someone who knows about stocks and bonds. I want someone who knows how to make soup taste like home and how to see good in people everyone else has dismissed. I want someone brave enough to tell a billionaire's father that dignity can't be bought. She studied his face, seeing the boy who'd been pressured to be perfect and the man who'd finally learned to choose happiness over expectation. What if I said yes? What would that look like? Like whatever we want it to look like, Christopher smiled. Maybe you could finish that teaching degree you mentioned. Maybe we could travel to all those places you've dreamed about. Maybe we could just have coffee together every morning for the next 50 years. 3 months later, they held their real wedding in Murphy's Diner, surrounded by Rebecca's co-workers, Christopher's genuinely happy father, and customers who'd become family. The reception dinner cost less than Christopher used to spend on a single business lunch, but it was the richest celebration either of them had ever experienced. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales like this one. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most impossible propositions, proving that genuine connection can bloom anywhere, even between a struggling waitress and a lonely billionaire who both needed to remember what really matters.